Hi, Brian. Thank you so much for taking the time out today and joining me in this episode. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, you're most welcome. The pleasure is mine for you coming to the show. I really appreciate it. So yeah, today we're going to discuss about your journey, like how you started your company and grow where it is right now, and during the pandemic and everything, despite all of the nods. So yeah, it's going to be interesting. So tell me a little bit about yourself. What do you do, and who are you serving at the moment? Then we can get to your journey.
Absolutely. So I'm the founder and CEO of World Changers Media, and I work with authors who are writing transformational nonfiction. So that encompasses, for me, anything from spiritual, self-help, conscious entrepreneurship, basically books that aim to change the world and change people's lives. So
Yeah.
I've been in this industry for over 15 years, but this iteration came about during 2020, actually. And I know we're going to dive into that a little bit today.
Yeah, a lot of business has been created in 2020. People have been forced to start something new, something unique to tackle this new era of the internet and everything. So yeah, a lot of people start a company like a digital marketing agency, like e-commerce stores, online something. But you come up with like a different idea, which is creating an agency for authors like who wants to publish their book and get publicity as well and get them sales. So how did you come up with the idea of like doing something unique when the whole world is doing something similar, everyone?
Well, it was kind of, I don't want to say forced on me, but the universe had very big ideas and I resisted them very
Yeah.
strongly for a very long time. So like I mentioned, I've been in the book and publishing world for over 15 years. And in 2018, I had taken a bit of a diversion and I had started a mindset coaching company, and I was doing events and retreats, and it was very fun. And my clients were getting amazing results. We were, talking about, the science behind reality creation and really, working with our minds to shift our perception in order to shift our results.
Yeah.
It was really cool. And then 2020, I had an entire year of events and retreats planned. And we all know what happened in 2020.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, I had no business. I was $40,000 in debt because of all the money I'd outlaid to, reserve event spaces and, pay subcontractors. And, I was very lucky in that my husband, who was also an entrepreneur, his business, we had no idea what was going to happen because he's a gondolier, like Venetian gondolas. And he has a company here in Rhode Island and also in Florida. And with all the lockdowns, we had no idea if he was going to have a business. So it was a really stressful time. Thankfully, gondolas are an outdoor activity that respects social distancing. So that was good. So that I was very lucky in that it gave me, because he was able to continue with his business, it gave me some space to sit back and say, okay, what am I really doing here? I had run away from being a freelancer in the publishing industry because I had so many big ideas of my own and I wasn't sharing them. And I felt like I was in this very backstage position. Yeah. And I knew that I didn't want to be in that role anymore. And so, like many of us do, I ran in the complete opposite direction and put myself on a stage and started, doing something that seemed completely unrelated. And what I realized as everything fell apart in 2020 is that we're always going to be brought back to a place that utilizes our full skill set. Like when we're really after an expression of our purpose, we're always going to be brought back to a place where we have to be all of who we are. And neither of those previous expressions had been all of me. And so I felt like that was really the lesson, is that if I wanted to work in a way that was purposeful, if I wanted to work in a way that was meaningful, if I wanted to do what I came here to do to change the world, I couldn't shut off these big parts of myself just because I didn't like who I was being in them. Right. And so after a lot of hemming and hawing, I actually had, an Akashic Records reading with my good friend Candy Haza, who is an amazing spiritual business strategist. And she gifted me a reading because I was in such a bad place. And she's like, you're going to kill me, but all I see around you is books. And I was like, no way, I'm not going back to that. I don't want to be, little freelancer hiding in my corner anymore. I was really against it. And part of that was ego, but part of that, I think, was also really refusing to recognize that there are a bajillion ways of doing what we do. And it's how we do what we do that is just as much aligned with our purpose as what we do. And when we find the right expression, it doesn't feel limiting. And so I had a teenage breakdown. I cried for a couple of days. And then I sat back and said, okay, if I was going to re-enter the book world, what would I want to do differently? What would I want to change? What would I want to do for my clients? And that was when World Changers Media was born. Wow. So
that's a great story.
It's basically, teenage angst coupled with pandemic, right? I mean, I think a lot of us have gone through something similar. And I think the real key to this evolution for me was recognizing that nothing that I had done in my past was valueless, even if I didn't want to express it that way anymore. And I see this for people a lot, and even a lot of the authors I work with, maybe they had a really extensive corporate career and then they left to go into coaching or consulting or become an artist or, something completely that seemed so opposite. And yet eventually something happens where they come back to this holistic expression of themselves. None of our time is wasted. None of our experience is wasted. And, for certain people in my world, time in corporate, although they would never want to go back to that particular situation, gave them a perspective for strategy that is invaluable in the work that they do today, even if it doesn't look related on the surface. So I think when we're looking at making big changes in our work, in our lives, it's like, how can I be all of me in this and not try to run away from this part of myself that I didn't like, or that I didn't like how I was being in this work over here. We can say, okay, so I didn't like how I was relating to this, but does it really need to be excluded from my life? Or are there lessons I can take from it? And that was a really interesting place to go, because there was so much about being in the book world that I loved. I loved working with my clients. I love expanding big ideas. I love creating teaching systems with people that encompass the whole of their experience. Like, our focus really is thought leadership.
Did you have any experiences publishing books prior to starting your company?
Yes. So I had worked as the chief editor for a small boutique publishing house, Inspired Living Publishing, from 2010 to 2018. I had also worked with numerous clients who were self-publishing and also authors who were traditionally publishing. I did a lot of ghostwriting. I did a lot of editing. I did some coaching, but mostly it was this very hands-on kind of expression. And after I stepped away, and this was another thing that kind of brought it all full circle. After I stepped away, I wasn't taking on any book work anymore, or very little. I had a couple of clients that I was finishing projects for. And a lot of people in my network started, publishing books. And what I was noticing was that either they were reaching for this traditional publishing contract, which is supposed to be the end all be all of if a traditional publisher signs you, you've made it, which 10 years ago was absolutely the case, and today is not the case. Or it was this, this sort of free for all that was happening in the self-publishing world with no quality control on behalf of authors. So, people were writing these manuscripts, doing their absolute best, but they weren't professional writers. And they would find these fee-for-service publishing companies that would basically just take whatever they created, put it in a layout, and publish it for them. And these books, I noticed, people were coming to me like, "Can you endorse my book?" And I'm like, "No," because this needs like 3 more rounds of editing before it becomes its best self. And it's actually not that I could actually, you know, come out at that point and say that to these people who were friends, but like, this book is doing damage to your brand because it's not finished. And just because you can pay someone to publish it doesn't mean that it's ready to be published. So there's this, you know, there's this wide open space between these two expressions. And I didn't see anybody taking a firm stand in it.
Yeah.
And so when I was deciding, okay, fine, I'm gonna, you know, do as I'm being called to do and follow these universal promptings. So, you know, just as a side note, after I had that session with my friend Candy, within 24 hours, 5 people called me for book work. It was, and I had been out of it for 2 years. It was crazy.
Yeah.
So I'm like, all right, if I'm gonna do this, then what is the best possible solution we can create for authors? And that was what I based my business model on.
Yeah, that's great. People often see like the success, like everything looks normal. You didn't go through any hardship, but there is a lot of story behind it. And one of them thing you mentioned, like you was nearly $40,000 in debt. So when you going through the debt and you didn't see any kind of certainty in your business because everything is changing and starting a new career, surprisingly. So how was your mindset that time? Like what did you actually do to calm yourself and then taking the right decision?
Well, for a while, my mindset was absolutely in the toilet. I mean, I had a good couple of months where it was basically just one big pity party. I was very lost. I was very frustrated. I had found this thing that I thought I was supposed to be doing, right? Air quotes, supposed to be. And it had all been snatched away. And I felt very powerless. And then I kind of had to come back to what I had been teaching previously, is that my reality unfolds according to how I perceive it. And so if I'm going to perceive myself as powerless in this situation, well, what's that going to do for me? And so it was really about walking my talk for me personally, especially because I had been doing so much work around mindset and manifestation, and coming back to this place where I could actually surrender and where I wasn't trying to run the show based on what I thought was the right way of doing things, was the right path. It was total and complete surrender.
Yeah.
And it was actually really powerful because I realized that I had been spending years getting it wrong and thinking that, you know, when we talk about, you know, stepping into a new version of yourself or creating a new reality, or like whatever language you put around it.
Yeah.
What we often say is like, we have to visualize it down to the littlest details so that you can feel it. And, you know, and you need to know like the steps to make it happen. And it's very like systemic, right? Systematic.
Yeah.
And I actually found out personally and have seen, you know, in multiple expressions since that's actually backwards. So our job as visionaries in our own lives, as visionary creators, as, you know, sovereign beings in our own reality, is to decide the what and the why. But the how is none of our business. And once I started getting out of my own way with the how, because as soon as we're under stress, we're like, how am I going to do that? How am I going to solve this problem? How am I going to pay off this debt? How am I going to launch another business? How? None of my business. And once I took my foot off that gas pedal, everything started to become clear. But, you know, we talk about like needing steps and needing processes and needing goals. And like, yeah, all of that is great. But really what we need is the what and the why. Yeah. And so the what for me was always thought leadership. It was always expanding big ideas, because ideas are where change starts. And the why was very similar, right? The why is because this world desperately needs a shift and I intend to be part of it. The how, I had no clue. But But when we start to get into the how of things, we're trying to micromanage the universe. We're trying to micromanage, if you want to use that language, God, right? And we always talk about partnership in creation and manifestation, like we're co-creating with the universe. But micromanaging is different than co-creating. So we have to be able to get some sense of surrender if we want the clarity that we're craving, because it never comes from that micromanaging. We can only determine the how from the place we stand right now, which is often limited and stressful.
Yeah, but with our entrepreneurs, like we always like tend to be like on how. 90% of the time we focus on the how. How am I gonna get any clients? How am I gonna get the pay and bills need to be paid off? How am I gonna pay my employees and etc. And all the time, like all of that time it goes on that kind of like a thinking rather than like creating and impacting other people's life. So how did you detach yourself from the how and focus more on a what and why?
Well, again, I was really lucky because I had some breathing room. My husband's business was able to restart, and I still had all this debt hanging over my head, but it wasn't like we weren't going to have food on the table. It wasn't like our kids were going to suffer. So, I was extremely privileged in that regard, because that's not the case for so many people, just not even the last couple of years, but always. So I want to acknowledge that. But it was really a case of, if I don't have to understand how it will happen, what would I want? Who would I want to be in this expression? What would I want to create? Why would I want to create it? And there's this cool thing that happens in our brains when we ask a question. It's called instinctive elaboration, right? If we ask a question, our brain has to answer it. And it will continue looking for an answer until we either feed it another piece of information or ask another question. So if the question is how am I going to do this? Then the answer is going to come first from your subconscious and then from your environment, because that's how your brain works. It first goes into its little storehouse and picks out all the things. Okay, well, you could do this, you could do this, you could do this. It's a very ground level kind of response. It's not a big picture. It's not visionary. It's not universal or magical or higher self oriented. And so the question then needs to change. And anytime we're in transition, the how should be the last thing we worry about.
Right.
What do I want? Why do I want it? What could this look like? If there were no limits, if there were no barriers, what would I do? And that's a completely different conversation going on in your own head. And that's where innovation comes from. The how is the last step. And a lot of times the how becomes obvious once you understand the what and the why. And then, we allow the magic to kind of occur, right? Because we've all experienced that synchronicity. When we make a powerful decision, things line up. Things happen that we could have never anticipated. But the decision was the starting point. So it's just a very different approach. And I think if more of us could get comfortable, because I still go through periods where I'm like, oh, I need to how. And that's when I get stuck. That's when my sales process gets complicated. That's when my company bottlenecks, I need to constantly pull myself back out of that and start asking the what and the why. And then things, it's like silt deposits in a river, right? It clears up and all of a sudden things are flowing again. But it feels counterintuitive because we're so conditioned to look for solutions to problems that we're not like, why don't we just change the whole environment or the whole situation? And then the problems won't even apply. So.
Yeah, same happened with me. Like when I started this podcast, I didn't know how am I gonna bring guests, and I had no clue. Then I started it and started with myself and did about 20 episodes without bringing any guest. I found a pod match, and then matchmaker, then apps. the how is always there. Right now, if I want to get booked for like a whole year, I can get booked for a whole year. So the how is like came, all of a sudden. But intention was to make an impact on people's life, and then God has the plan. And
Exactly.
right now, it's like plenty of people reaching out to me being a guest. I don't have to reach out to them. So yeah, things happens. It's kind of automatic thing. So following question will be like next thing, which is after you starting your company, how hard was it to build it where you're at right now?
I have to say it was practically miraculous. Basically what I did is I came into this place where like, okay, fine. So, I'm not going to continue doing what I was doing with events and retreats. I'm going to go back into the book world. I'm going to do this in a way that serves authors and ideas at the highest level. What does that look like? And then I called a bunch of people in my network. Some of them I had known from my previous freelancer days. Some of them were new contacts. And I just told them what I was doing. Hey guys, this is my idea. This is what I want to create. These are the results I was able to achieve with authors previously. This is where we're taking it. And my beta program sold out in 4 weeks. So it was just letting people know. And part of that was built on the strength of a network that was 10 years in the making.
Yeah.
Part of it was just sheer unattachment. Like, I'm going to try this and see where it goes. I'm still ambivalent, universe. I'm not really sure I want this, and there was no attachment to making sales. I had actually called most of these people to just say, do you know anybody who wants to write a book? Because I'm testing out this model. And more than 70% of the people I called were like, oh, that's me. Yeah, sign me up. So, so it was less a sales process than just like an information blanketing. And it's amazing when we are aligned with what we're doing, that sales is no longer sales. It's simply informing. Like, guys, I'm doing this thing. Here's why I think it's important. Here's why I think it's cool. Here's why I think it's different. And, most of the time when I reach out, especially to people I don't know well, it's a question of, do you have anybody in your network who might need this? It's not a direct sell. It's not a huge ask. And, and I have an amazing partner referral program that just makes everything, of course, of course I'll send people to you. So it really is very easeful. But it felt like an explosion. Like all of a sudden I went from having no business.
But do you think like it's not overnight success because of your past 10 years experience that made it easy, right? That was the behind the scene building process for the last 10 years.
So I had prior expertise. Exactly. And I had a lot of good testimonials. I had good relationships under my belt. But this is it's a very different way of working. So previously I was freelancing, right? So from 2006 to 2018, I was basically, paid by the hour, freelancing. I kind of learned to do everything in the book world, even things that weren't necessarily related to ghostwriting and editing. I learned how to flow books. I learned how to use InDesign. I learned how to, create book covers. I learned how to actually manage a publishing process. And so I had all of that at my disposal already. And I had developed methods that were sort of half formed, that I hadn't even acknowledged were methods or my creation. And then launching World Changers in 2020 really prompted me to give those more form so that they're teachable, they're trainable. And now I have an incredible staff of editors who are not only highly experienced in their own right, but are able to actually implement my methods really beautifully and seamlessly for clients.
Yeah, that's great. So so business is growing right now. So what is the like a main vision and goal right now for like 2022 or probably in the 5 years time?
Yeah, absolutely. The goal is to really create a new way of publishing that serves authors first and foremost.
Right.
Because I believe that what's happening in traditional publishing is that a lot of publishers are only taking, very kind of sure shot kind of clients, right? So,
Yeah.
If you have a 1 million person following, like, yeah, sure. But for up and coming thought leaders who are building those kinds of empires, but are not there yet, it's not very supportive. And even the available resources for traditionally published authors in terms of marketing have really dwindled. And, it's not operating in the way it used to. So what's actually happening feels kind of like a popularity contest. And it's not as much a marketplace for new and innovative ideas as it used to be.
Right.
And then on the other side, like we talked about before, we have this self-publishing world, which is a complete free-for-all.
Yeah.
And, and there's no real guidance for authors to know, what are some things that actually matter when you publish a book, and what kinds of things are important in a book to make sure it does its job, and that's really a matter of good editing, professional layout. It needs to be well edited and well designed. And so what we've created is something in the middle where we have all of the quality control pieces from traditional publishing, where we have an extensive editing process. We have a really fantastic design and layout process, all the things that really take a book from a first draft to its best self.
Yeah.
But we have it in a fee-for-service model where our authors own 100% of their rights and royalties. So it's really, at this point, we can produce a book that is equivalent to anything that's being produced anywhere.
Right.
And have authors get extraordinary results, and they retain ownership of all of their material. They're actually making profits on the books instead of 6% net royalties. They're getting 100% of net royalties. And if these authors are going to need to manage their own marketing processes anyway, then why wouldn't they take that ownership of their material? Yeah. So it's a really fun place to be, because my biggest vetting process is not around marketability. I mean, we can market anything if we believe in it. I mean, there's a woman selling her farts on TikTok, I mean, like, let's be real. The author needs to believe in the product, and the ideas need to be presented in a way that's easily consumable. But the marketability of the idea is not my first vetting point. It's really, is this idea going to create positive change? And are we going to be able to create a product for the author that will stand the test of time, that will be a legacy piece, that will be a thought leadership piece? And coming at things from that angle, this is an important idea, let's do it, is very different than, I don't know if I can sell this to the 30 to 45-year-old woman demographic, and I think that being in service to ideas is what the world really needs right now.
Yeah, that's great. That's a great vision to have. So we're running out of time this podcast. So those who's listening, if they want to work with you or learn more about your company, how they can find out?
Absolutely. So the web address is worldchangers.media. And there's a link right on the homepage. If you are wanting to write a thought leadership book, you can book a call with me right on the homepage. It's very, very easy and streamlined. Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much, Bryna, for sharing your journey. It was like a pleasure you coming to the show and sharing with our audience. So we're running out of time. So I wish you best of luck with your new company, and 2022 you grow more and get bigger success. So thank you so much. Thank you very, very much for having me. It was an absolute pleasure to spend this time with you. You're most welcome. Thank you. So that's a wrap, guys. You know how to find Bryna and her company. So go visit our website. I'm going to leave the link on the description as well, so you can check out. And if anyone wants to work with Bryna, go check out our social media platform as well. So till then, stay safe, stay healthy. I'll talk to you in the next episode. Thank you, everyone.